Hi, everyone. A very warm welcome to the HKDI Master Lecture Series, where we have a great lineup of designers from different parts of the world to share their knowledge in different aspects with our audience. Also, we have a student audience, but we also have a professional audience who's joining us live on YouTube right now. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Bo Linnemann, who's founder of Kontrapunkt, and also Nana Newsten, business development from Kontrapunkt. I'm sure you've seen Kontrapunkt's work before. I'm sure you've tried Carlsberg. They designed the typeface and also the identity. I'm sure you've played Lego before. There are lots of Lego stores in Hong Kong as well, and I'm sure you recognize the really well-known logo that Lego has. And I always tell this story. 20 years ago, my first time in Copenhagen, and as soon as I got into Copenhagen's train station, I was struck by the really iconic typeface that Kontrapunkt designed, and the identity, of course, for the National Railway of Denmark, with a very very recognizable and very interesting typeface. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bo and Nana to you, who's going to talk about designing brand identities today. Bo and Nana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Keith. And it's such an honor and a pleasure to be invited into this series of talks. And we hope that we, during the next hour, can share some case studies we have been working on here in Kontrapunkt that could help to make it a bit more understandable and clear how a brand identity exercise looks like. So we will go through 2 projects and 2 cases, and before we do that, Nana will take us through, you can say the whole, you can say pre-studies before we actually start designing. So let's jump into it, and we'll share our screen. And
yes, I think technically we need to change something so we can share our screen. I don't know, there's some settings. Yes, perfect. Thank you. And hi all, thank you for listening in. We are so happy to be able to share this with you. Let us just find our presentation. Yes. So I hope everyone can see the slides now. Good.
Okay. I'm Bo Linnemann, and as Keith said, I'm the partner and the founder of Kontrapunkt, and this is the eldest design agency in Denmark, going back to 1984. So that's more than 35 years ago. So we have quite a substantial experience working with brand identities, because that's the only thing we have been doing throughout all the years. So yeah.
Yes, and my name is Nana, and I'm a client manager at Kontrapunkt, where I make sure that the processes are facilitated in the right way, and that both the clients and the creative team here in Kontrapunkt are happy and meet all the ambition that we want to in our projects. So just let's take a look into what we want to talk to you about today. So we would like to share just a little bit about Kontrapunkt, and set the scene for how we work. And then we will dive into our approach into branding and show you a bit of do's and don'ts and some inspiration for how we think branding. And then as well, we will go into some case design, and Bo will go through 2 case studies. So you can see how the process leading up to a project and how it can look in the creative part of the project as well.
And then we hope to end the session with a hopefully fruitful Q&A session.
Yes.
And please pitch in with any comments or questions you might have at that time.
For sure. So just to talk a little bit about Kontrapunkt. As Bo said, we are a little bit more than a 35-year-old design and experience agency. And we have offices here in Copenhagen, but we do also have one in Tokyo, actually. And when we work with clients, it's a really broad range of clients. It's everything between the big Fortune 500 that everybody knows, but it's also startups and very digital-minded companies. So it's a broad range of client types we have.
We have, for about more than 15 years, had our own office in Tokyo and have been working with major Japanese clients for throughout those years. And it's very interesting for us to actually be represented in two different parts of the world, and that actually covers that we actually work with clients not only in Japan and Denmark, but throughout any
part of
the world.
Yeah.
And as Keith said, we are mostly working with the you can say the blue chip companies, international blue chip companies, but also working with something like this in the middle. You see Noma, which is a restaurant, very famous restaurant here in Copenhagen, that we have helped to brand the restaurant internationally. As you can see here, many of our projects are based on typography, and this is because we have had a tradition here in Kontrapunkt to work with typeface design for more than 30 years. And we have what we call a type lab here, where we work very dedicated with bespoke typefaces, and we see the typeface as one of the main, you can say, ingredients in a toolbox for brand identities, and we'll come back to this in our presentation.
So you can say what we do is that we work with brand identities, but we also make sure that it's founded in a strategic core. So when we see brand identity is done right, it's not just an image of how the company looks like. It's also a statement of what you actually believe in today, but also where you are heading in the future. That's very important for us to make sure that what we do is long lasting. I will also come into that a little bit later. So we also make sure that when we work with clients, we ask them into their role in the world. What is the purpose of the company? Because that is what we want to express through the brand. So this is very important for us to make sure that they are relevant in the world of tomorrow. So looking into these two areas, we often see that a brand or a company has a really, a really solid and really well-worked business strategy. They know what to do, they know exactly what they're good at, but not necessarily a solid and strategically funded brand strategy on how the actual brand should be perceived. So what we do is that we work with the brand strategy part, and what to make sure that a brand is a good brand, is a genuine brand and creates actual value. We want the business strategy and the brand strategy to go near each other and to overlap, because that is where we can create real value for the target audience. So when we have this, where the brand strategy is anchored in the business strategy and the business strategy is talking into the brand strategy, we see a really nice synergy where value is created, both for your customers, but also for your brand. And it should also, at a later stage, show in your business case as well. So that's why we think it's really important, not just to do beautiful design, but also to anchor it strategically in the organization and in the business strategy. So this is a little lead up to how we work. And we work with what we call holistic branding. And what does that mean? Well, let us show you. We have this really nice model that we use a lot, that we have developed ourselves, that shows how we work with branding as a holistic approach. So what I said before about the business strategy and the brand strategy being aligned, this really comes to the test in the core. You can see the brand core in the middle, which is from where we work. So we have to know something about what is the role of this brand, what is the story, which values is it founded on. And in order to do that, we have to learn more about the company. We have some examples later on process and how we do this. But it's very important for us that design is anchored in the core, because once you have a core that is strong and clear and aligned, you know what is relevant to your target audience, you know what is relevant to your employers or to future talent you want to attract with your brand. And then you have this kind of northern star that you can base every decision that you do upon for future reference. So moving into the next layer of the model here is the brand expression. And this is where it gets really interesting in terms of the design, because this is where we want to create the toolbox to express the brand. So we know what the strategy is, we know where we're heading because we have defined that in the brand core. Now we need to see, okay, but how does that represent itself in a logo or in a color or in the way we speak, in the tone of voice? So there's all different parts of the overall brand expression that you can tap into. Sound is a really interesting and relatively new area to tap into. We all know how it sounds when we open a MacBook, for example. So this is also one aspect of the entire brand expression. Once we have defined this, what you say, visual and communicative toolbox, then it's time to put it into good use. So even though you have a really strong strategic direction on your brand, you know exactly what it's supposed to look like, you also need to make sure that it's actually coming to life on your different touch points, that your audience and your target groups are interacting with. So maybe you have a really beautiful design guide that you know about, but if you don't implement it, for example, on a website or on your PowerPoint, then it doesn't really come to life. So in order for us to claim that we do holistic branding, it's really important that we start from within and move our way out in this model, and that we look at all the different touch points within the brand experience that your target audience is interacting with, because that is actually where you live and you meet the brand in your everyday life.
And just a small comment here, you know, the thing is, and that we all are aware, that a brand identity cannot really make a success of the business in itself. Because we all, I mean, a successful brand identity have to, you can say, support the behavior and the way the company acts.
Yes.
And therefore, the behavior is something that hopefully the brand identity also can provoke and influence, so everything becomes aligned. And this is a completely new area for brand identity agencies. I believe that we can actually influence the whole behavior of a company, and not only how we experience a company in terms of visuals. So in that way, you can say the subject here becomes much, much bigger in the future. And this is something we will tell a bit about in the next session we will run here later next month.
Mm-hmm. Another model that we have developed is this 4 criteria for developing what we call genuine brands. So when we talk about genuine brands, we want to make sure that a brand and what we do, and that's thinking about the model you saw before. So all the layers that we work with have to live up to this, and that's something we have in mind all the way through the process. So these 4 criteria are as following. So we want the new brand or the new transformation of the brand to be unique. So we want to make sure that it doesn't look like other competitors, for example. Is there anything that we can draw from either history or some new ambitions that we know is just for this company to stand out with? Then let's tap into that to make sure that the identity and the experience that we have with the brand is unique. We also want to make it credible. Sometimes you can design something or you can develop something that doesn't really resonate if the people or the target audience know the brand beforehand. So we need, of course, to make a transformation and to develop the brand as such, but it can only go so far. So we want to make sure that it's true to maybe its legacy or self-perception or the internal culture that is actually anchored in the organization. So we want to know how far we can take the brand on its journey today. Then, of course, we need to make sure that the brand is relevant. And we need to dive into who should we be relevant for, because we can't be relevant for everyone, then we're not relevant for anyone. So we want to make sure we know who is our target audience, what do they value, what do they resent, and how do we, in the best way, present our brand for them. So we want to make sure that the customers are interested and find value whenever they interact with the brand. This makes it relevant. And then, of course, as a last thing, we want to make sure that everything we do is long-lasting. What we do here in Kontrapunkt is not campaigning that change every week. This is solid work that is useful for many, many years to come. So when we do these large-scale brand transformation, we also want to make sure that it's not just design that looks right today, it also needs to look right tomorrow. So that is our job as designers and professionals to make sure that what we develop is tapping into something that has a long-lasting effect.
It's durable, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
You can say the investment that the clients do in these kind of projects, it's our responsibility to make that investment profitable, and that we can do by making it long-lasting. So they don't have to rebrand themselves every third year or whatever.
And having stated that it should be long lasting is not the same as that you can't work with your brand on an ongoing basis, because that is really important that you always revise and always have a finger on the pulse to know what's happening and how is the brand perceived. So nothing is set in stone, but we should have the corners, or the very ground of the brand solidified. So we use this model very much to sanity check what we do and how we work. Just to give you a bit of insight to a typical brand transformation project, we have these 4 stages of the project that we typically go through. And that is, of course, because we want to make sure that what we do is funded strategically and also crafted in the design phase. So we have typically some sort of insights phase before we start. So this could be doing interviews or focus groups. This could be gathering relevant material about how the brand is performing today to get a status quo. It could be to talk to, of course, target audience and find those. It could also be to read through the business strategy to know where the brand is going. And there's a lot of way to gather insights, but we want to know a lot to be able to reflect this in our design. Then sometimes we do, it could be a purpose, a mission, a brand positioning exercise, some key messages, but we want to somehow transform these insights into something that's actionable and something that sets the direction of both the brand itself and the core that we talked about earlier, but also helps anchor the design on something specific. So once we have developed some kind of brand strategic foundation, we can go into the design phase. And doing this, we use design drivers. So we want to make sure that we have some words that are comprehensible and easy to understand for designers, which doesn't necessarily work well with a strategy buzzword. Maybe we need to work a little bit with to give more images in the head for design. And Bo will show you some examples on this later. Then, of course, we go into the design of the toolbox that we talked about. And this can have all sorts of elements in it. It can be the logo, of course, the typeface, photo style, colors, maybe icons, illustration, maybe a graphic element, animation, and motion design. Anything can go into this black box. So, you know, depending on how big the project is, we will look into all of these areas. We will also make sure that we do a visual audit of the competitors that we have defined together, or map the market or the industry, to make sure that we know what's going on, and that we are tapping into something that's relevant, and also making sure that everything is unique. Once we have settled on how is the visual identity of the brand, we will go into what we call activation, because the word activation actually says it all. You need to activate your brand to make it come alive. Of course, we want to document the design that we've done in a design guide, but we also want to implement it and roll out the new concept to all the touch points, whatever is needed in the organization. That might be a PowerPoint template. It might be an entire new website. It might be the signage system or the wayfinding within the company's building. It can be business cards. It can be anything. And of course, we also really urge brands to make sure that there's ongoing reviews and audit of the identity once the organization typically takes it into use themselves. Things can change, so we want to make sure that the design lives up to the concept intentions and the overall intentions of the design. But now let's get into the concept development and how we work with design. So we have done some strategy now, and we want to actually see how might the brand look for the future. And
so we will focus here on the actual creative process in the design development phase. Mm-hmm. And in Kontrapunkt, when we do these projects, we start to appoint a project team working with the client. And the project team normally consists of a client director, a project manager, a creative director, and a brand strategy consultant. But later in the stage, in the process, more people are added. Some more concept designers and a copywriter maybe. And if necessary, we apply also a motion designer and spatial designer. And in the last phases, as Nana just told us, the activation designers are activated. So this is quite a big team that is handling these processes. And it's not because everyone is working full time during the whole process, but we have a team that is responsible for the overall process. Let's go through two projects which are quite interesting, both of them in our view. One of them is the rebranding of Mitsubishi Motors that we did some years ago, and the other one is a company that might not be that well known in your area of the world. It's called Ørsted, and it's now the biggest green energy supplier in the world, actually, coming from Denmark, and is leading the whole green transformation worldwide. Okay, I hope we can...
We have a lot of slides.
Yeah, we have a lot of slides, and we have to go very fast through these slides. I apologize if we should keep our time schedule. But restarting Mitsubishi Motors, as we call the project, was the fact that, we could say that our task was actually to give back the pride of the brand, because Mitsubishi Motors is a very, you can say, trusted car brand, and has been a very trusted car brand for many years, producing these very durable four-wheel drive cars, which are able to actually take you anywhere. And they have a very strong legacy and a very strong, you can say, design legacy also in terms of their brand. But as many other brands in the industry, they also were struck by cheating with the emission numbers of their models, car models. And this is not only for Mitsubishi Motors, but it goes from most of the brands in the industry, actually. Also, the big European car brands were struck by this. So it's actually mostly, you can say, a certain culture you have in the industry, almost like the doping in the bicycling sports. So that meant that Mitsubishi Group that owned Mitsubishi Motors, they sold the Mitsubishi Motors to Nissan and Renault Group. So suddenly they had some new owners that also had new ambitions with the brand and to build the trust back into the brand. And we were hired to help reshaping the whole brand from A to Z. And this is one of the projects that, as we call, that has a huge stakeholder seller, as we call it, because there's so many stakeholders to involve in this process, and they all have to be heard, and they all have opinions, and they all have, opinions on where to take the brand. And it's not only the management, but it's also the board of directors, it's the marketing departments, it's the dealerships in this case, and it's the internal design department. So all these, and there are a lot of people in each of these groups, and all of them have to be aligned on how this brand should look like in the future. So that was our, you can say, biggest challenge to to make all these people agree on one direction. As Nana just told us, we go through a lot of competitor analysis, looking into the industry. How do the other competitors perform? How do they look? What colors are attached or associated with the different car brands, in order to find a space where we can sort of be alone. And this means that we, initiate the project with the project team, as we saw before, and we just start, sketching a lot of different ideas down based on the whole brand strategy that already at this point had been executed or defined. So we actually sort of empty our heads in order to find some new routes and some new visual attributes that we could build the future brand on. And during this process, we end up with defining 3 scenarios for the brand to go. And this is in order to align all these stakeholders, to make them realize what does it mean if we go in one direction compared to another direction. So we define these 3 scenarios and we give them each a name. In this case, the craft, the quest, and the spirit. And as you will see in a minute, these different scenarios, they address different target audiences. So it's also a very strategic exercise. Which target audience do you actually address or do you associate with?
And also, it's also looking into the communication. So how are we framing the concept that we want them to see, and what is the mindset that they should be in once they imagine what if the new brand looked like this? So it's also a way to kind of show how the brand experience should be.
And what we do here is that we develop 3 small videos that should actually capture the spirit of each scenario. so the audience can sort of associate with it, and they can realize what does it mean, and what is the tone of scenario 1 or 2 or 3. And let's take you through these small videos. They only last for 15 seconds, so it's quite fast.
Yes, and I think this is where you should.
Can we start this video?
So Keith, is the video playing from you?
Hi, Nana, this is technical support. Could you please stop sharing your screen first?
Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
Yes. And sorry, please allow us to share the screen.
For sure.
Yes, at the participant slide. Participant slide, and allowed more to be co-host. Is it okay? Sorry, Nana, could you just add the Zoom control at the participant column? Yes. And allowed as account and click more.
Yes.
And
Well,
allow us as co-host.
Yes, you
Yes,
are co-host
thank
now.
So I will share the video now.
Yes, and it's the next way.
Yes. The first one will be next way. Okay. We're playing now.
I hope you could see, we couldn't see it on a full screen, so I hope you guys could see it, just to make sure.
And yeah.
Yeah, we saw it. Very
Okay.
good. Very nice.
As you could see, this concept we call the next way is actually giving the association of Mitsubishi Motors as being a Japanese, purely Japanese brand that has the Japanese craftsmanship into it. And this is a way of, exposing and being proud of the Japanese, you can say, heritage. And it's maybe I think we should run all 3 videos, so we don't have to jump back and forth between videos and
so maybe you
slides.
could put a few words on the next video we're going to see.
Yes, the next video called Your Way is a concept that is building on, you can say, the robustness of Mitsubishi Motors. It's this, that the car can actually take you anywhere, and it can go through rough terrains and
whatever you want.
Yeah, wherever you
deliver.
want. It's a very masculine universe, visual universe, and perhaps we should run that now.
Yes. Your way.
Okay, I hope you got it. And the last scenario, we call it New Way. and that is addressing a much younger and new audience. And this could be helpful for Mitsubishi Motors to actually be more appealing to a new audience. So this is a completely different universe, as you will see. Let's run that now. Nope. Okay, let's go back to the slide.
Yes.
Show.
Yeah. So
And you know, this was actually a way, as I said, to get all people aligned. And what not surprisingly was chosen of these three concepts was the middle one, that we call Your Way. And this is because that was actually the most, you can say, true story compared to the history of Mitsubishi Motors brand. And after having developed this, we take the whole brand platform with progressive, robust, and ingenious as the brand drivers, and then we design a bespoke typeface that supports this story of robustness. And then we develop the new logo and logotypes, and we add the tagline "Drive Your Ambition" to it. So, and then we design us through all touch points from, you can say, printed matters to even spatial experiences in the dealer stores, creating, you can say, a retail experience around the new brand. And also the car badges are redesigned, and iconography. So everything is sort of based on the same, you can say, style and atmosphere. And this is what actually creates this, you can say, homogeneous feeling of a brand that is, you can say, well thought through into any touch point. And in the overall, you have a, you can say, very coherent experience, brand experience, you know, from packaging to dealer stores to digital touch points to retail experiences and so on. So, yeah, we hope this can sort of demonstrate a bit how you build a concept for one of the major car brands in the world. Time is running, and we don't have much time for the last case I would take you through. Sorry. But this is a completely different story, which is also extremely interesting, because this is a case story that taps into, you can say, the whole agenda of where the world is, going. And we all know about the climate challenges that we have, and we all know that we have to go from black to green energy. But in Denmark, we had a state-owned energy supplier that had this ambition of being the first really big energy supplier to become completely green. And this
rely only on sustainable energy sources.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this company used to be called DONG, which stands for Danish Oil and Natural Gas. And this company also looked like a very old, you can say, old-fashioned energy supplier, which is not appealing to any customer or any consumer. And And they had this ambition to create a world that runs entirely on green energy. And actually, this is, you can say, a challenge they exposed themselves to about 5 years ago. And today they already reached that goal to be the biggest green energy supplier at all. And the CEO had this ambition to say that we are one of those companies that must lead the world forward, so to speak. And therefore they lowered their CO2 emissions, and throughout a number of actually quite a few years. And likewise, they also increased the share of green energy.
So this is what we say when we say that the business strategy should be also reflected when we do a brand exercise, because if the business strategy of changing from the black to the green energy sources wasn't actually in plan, you can't have a brand that claims to be green and sustainable. So this really showcases how important it is to have the business strategy with.
And becoming one of the biggest brands in Denmark, global brands in Denmark, we also decided to base the whole experience on the Nordic roots and the Danish functionalism, because we have a very strong, you can say, heritage in Denmark, being you can say a design nation. And we thought that it could be interesting to activate, you can say, the attributes around the Danish legacy as being a design nation in this new brand. So we defined 3 brand drivers, as we call it: bold, inventive, and optimistic. Because the optimism is really important in turning the whole world from being black to becoming green. And we wanted to really create this optimistic experience where you actually can encourage people to believe in that there is a green future for the world. And this is some of the images we based the whole new design upon, which is the Danish functionalism going back 100 years back in time. And as you can see, the whole functionalism is based on simplicity and functionalism, of course. And these 2 words were actually driving our way through. And this is something we have, all experienced as being Danes, that we have these very, you can say, attractive environments in our country. So again here, as with Mitsubishi Motors, we start designing a bespoke typeface. And in this case, we shape the typeface as if it was influenced by the wind, because it's all about wind energy in Ørsted. And you can actually feel how the letter shape is actually shaped by the wind exposure. And this is how we built the brand experience with the new color scheme, the typeface, the logo in the top left-hand corner called Ørsted, with the stroke in the O referring to the power button. So it also, the logo indicates what kind of industry we are in. But again, a very simplified identity with actually no symbol marks in the logo, besides from this stroke in the starting letter. And again, in the printed matters, we have a very, you can say, clean and very optimistic experience. And also in the spatial design, these are exhibition fairs or booths in the fairs. So we also created a whole architectural experience around the brand. and also the signage systems that we developed, where the wind can actually pass through the sign panel, so it's not blocked by the wind, blocking the wind, so to speak. And also in digital platforms, we, should make the world or the brand come to life in digital or mobile devices. Also, we were working with the tone of voice and helped the Ørsted to actually come across with their key messages. And
communicating the big change as well.
Yes. And obviously, this is a huge exercise with turning a very big company into a completely new business. And there are so many different work streams that we were conducting here in Kontrapunkt. I think we have actually more than 100 different work streams parallel,
this is looking
running.
into how do you actually implement and anchor the identity concept, and this was what had to be done, right?
And this is where the project managers come in, because this is not a work for designers to actually organize and control all these different work streams. So a lot of different project managers were applied to this. So we end up with, you can say, having a very solid toolbox, design toolbox, going from the logo, typography, the color scheme, some graphical elements that we can use on different surfaces. We also define how should a video be, the whole atmosphere and experience in videos and films. The tone of voice, how do we actually, how do we form our messages? How do we organize our images in new photo styles, and how do we communicate with iconography in all touch points? So in all, you can say, as we start saying this morning, that we create sort of a holistic experience around the brand.
And we're still working with Ørsted, still looking into new ways of refining the brand experience, still looking into new platforms to implement it. So it's a big task.
We regard this as actually an organism that we constantly have to nurture, and that really can develop over time. And that also means that they don't have to change dramatically their brand experience from year to year, but we can slowly refine it over time. And this brand was launched overnight in 2019. And it was a huge event, not only in Denmark, but actually worldwide, that suddenly the world has experienced a completely green energy supplier. Okay.
We have a video for this as well, maybe just to finish off, and then so you can,
maybe we could
stop sharing our screen.
And by showing the video that actually captures the whole, you can say, look and feel of the new brand.
And then we're ready for the Q&A session.
Right.
So you can play the Ørsted video. Perfect.
All right.
Thank you very much, Bo and Anna. Excellent presentation. I think those two case studies, you've proved your point saying, they are elegantly produced. They are very well crafted, but also very intelligent because there's so much strategy behind these two brands. And as you said, brand strategy and business strategy have to come together in order for it to work. And I think you've proved your point there with the two case studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. We already have a couple of questions on YouTube. We have three questions actually already.
Yeah.
So I'll start with Yuhei Mac's question. If I want to design a brand, what things I should think about first?
Ooh.
First thing.
I think you should start with what is the intention of the brand? What should it solve? Why is it here?
Yes.
Because without answering that question, you don't know what to design for.
And, it's interesting also because it also taps into, the way you actually design brands today. Because now I'm an old guy on the block, and when I was younger, a brand identity always started with the logo. Let's create a new logo, and from there you could sort of take all the rest. But today it's very different because now you don't start with the logo. At least that's not what we do. The logo is very important still, but it's just one thing out of many things to create the whole brand experience. So first you have to define, with your empathy, you have to think about your vision for this brand. What kind of experience do we want people to have when they're exposed to the brand? And that's where you start. And then the logo, sometimes the logo is actually one of the last parts that we are designing, because the logo should support the experience. So we start with that.
I want to follow up with because I know Kontrapunkt uses typography or typefaces quite prominently in the brands. We always say, people don't really read so much. They look at images, videos, and motion graphics, as you've shown in your work as well. What is the value of typography or typefaces in a brand these days? When a lot of things is digital and people look at things rather than read things.
That's really a good point, Keith, and thanks for asking that question, because it's something that is very close to my heart. And what we have realized throughout the years is the fact that brands nowadays, they are, as you say, they are mostly talking with images. Yeah. But still, you have a lot of text that you have to, come across with. And, if you think about digital devices nowadays, you don't even have room for a logo anymore, because when you scroll down on your mobile phone, you only see text and images, because the logo has, scrolled up and disappeared. So, creating a bespoke typeface means that you can actually build in the whole brand experience in the typeface. So that means that whenever you read just a word, you connect to the brand.
In the reading experience itself, yeah, right.
Yes, and it's always a balance. This is a whole new, you can say, subject. We could spend, a whole presentation.
Well, there's always a next time, so.
But it's always a matter of balancing readability and character in these typefaces, because it shouldn't become too, expressive, because then you are getting tired of reading it, and it might be hard to read it. So it shouldn't challenge the readability, but it should carry the whole, you can say, brand character in each of the letters. So you have this reading experience that connects to the brand.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask, I've been wanting to ask you this for a while, actually. Now I remember that a lot of fashion brands have switched to, from like very elegant didos and bedonis to grotesque typefaces, like Helvetica-like typefaces.
That's right.
Why do you think that's the case, and how do you think they're functioning as brand identity elements?
That's also really a good point. And it's something we have been studying a lot here in Kontrapunkt, because it is true what you say, that especially within the fashion industry, they seem to follow each other. And in the fashion industry, you tend to actually change your logo to almost generic words. And we're having no character. It's the more neutral it is, the better, so to speak. And for some reason, we are in an industry here with the fashion brands that are, following each other. So when one is doing this, then the rest of the pack are following it, especially when the market leaders are changing the way they behave.
Aren't they supposed to be different? They want to do
Exactly.
new things, right? Fashion.
It's really a paradox, because branding is about, standing out from the crowd, I would say. But in this industry, it seems as if it's more the products that are, that are shaping the brand rather than the graphics.
Right. Yes. Right.
And again, sorry. Yeah. We could speak a lot about that.
Right. I'm just looking at the time, and we still have a few
Yeah,
questions.
I think we have a little minute left. So
Yeah. Angelica Leung is asking, some customers insist on a particular concept. How do you convince them that your professional suggestion is better? Have you come across any kind of situations like that where the owner or the client is quite insistent on something?
Very often. Mm-hmm. Oh, I would say in most cases, actually.
Wow. Okay.
And so this is also a really good point. And I would say it's always, you can say, a negotiation to do this. And sometimes the brand owner or the client, they have a good point, by, claiming their interests. In other cases, we can actually persuade them by showing something which is even better than what they imagine themselves. So it's always this negotiation, and we normally find our way through this.
But I also think that it's important to mention, for example, these design drivers that you saw, for example, for Ørsted, which was bold, inventive. These are really good to anchor the design decisions upon, to say, can you see how this actually delivers on what we agreed was important? Because then you take kind of your own opinions out and have to put on the strategic hat. And that is a way to work with it that makes it a little bit more, the discussions a little bit more qualified. And not only likings.
Exactly, because it's very much about personal, you can say, taste.
Yeah.
And we have to get the discussion behind that, so we avoid personal opinions. That my wife, she loves red, so
right. So to bring the visual aspects to the strategic strategic viewpoint, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a very good advice for everybody. Do we have time for another one?
I think I might have to go, but Bo can stay and take a question more.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks, Nana. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Let's do one more. Each culture has some specific cultural icons, identity, or sensitivities. I like this one, actually. When working across cultures, how can you address these? Perhaps it is a culture you're totally unfamiliar with. I think Mitsubishi is a good example, because it's a very very old Japanese brand. So how did you deal with the cultural sensitivities and the cultural differences and such deep-rooted corporate culture as well.
Yes, again, a very, very precise point. I would say, now we have been showing two cases that both are global brands, means that they can work across cultures, across borders in any parts of the world. And, it's the challenge here is that the more exposure the brand have globally, the more generic, so to speak, you might make it, you might create the brand, because then it's quite neutral to different cultures or even religions or whatever.
Yeah, it used to be that way, wasn't it? I mean, with the Swiss typographic style after the war, international means kind of a lack of identity, I think, in a way.
Yes, but even you can say the Swiss style also have an you can say an edge to it, because it's so simple and sharp and precise, and without any you can say attributes other than the strictness. But I would say what we do in Kontrapunkt, we don't really test our concepts, but we actually rely on our own empathy and opinions, which is, you could say, very unprofessional. But on the other hand, if you should go and test things around, then you will end up with having no edge, I would say. Because then you will always be doing something in the middle of the road that actually is not appealing to anyone. So what we try to do here is to create our own universe for each brand, and sort of rely on that this is also acceptable in different cultures and religions.
Right.
And I cannot really say more than it is a matter of keeping something which is unique and original and expressive, but not, you can say, challenge the different cultures. And this is again you can say a negotiations.
Yeah, right. So not to kind of get into areas where there could be kind of taboos or yeah.
And of course, as a designer, you are quite aware of the big, you can say, red flags that might be there.
Right.
And of course, we don't challenge that, So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Would you say we are kind of getting into more kind of recognizing local cultures everywhere, rather than having the the kind of one size fits all kind of international way of branding? How do you feel about that?
I certainly hope that we can, also in the future make very expressive brands that have define their own, you can say, place to be, and their own way of doing things, and not just be completely common and neutral or generic. So that's really, you can say, what I try to pursue every time, that we can reach to something which is really original and which is really different from anyone else. So I hope that's the way things will go, and that's at least the way that I try to lead in my own, in my small world here.
Great. Thank you very much. Maybe we'll stop here. Thank you very much, Bo, because there's another opportunity where Bo is going to speak about the future of branding. And we look forward to the second round very soon.
I look forward. Yeah, me too. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much. Thanks very much, Bo.
And for inviting me to this. And have now it's morning here in Copenhagen, but I believe it's afternoon.
Yeah, it's past
late
5 o'clock now. Yeah.
So
Well, you have
good-
a good day ahead of you. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much, and see you soon.
Yeah, and please just be in touch with us if you might have any other questions we can answer. We can do that online.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Just write to us or whatever.
Yeah.
Reach out, please. We'll
Great.
be happy to
Yeah,
answer.
excellent. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care, all of you.
See you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye. We can clap.